Sometimes we need a little extra oomph to get us through a meeting we're dreading, a conversation we're avoiding, or an interaction we're putting off because we think it's going to be difficult. Maybe too difficult. The way we decide to show up in the world and with others certainly impacts our experience. Albert Mehrabian was a professor at UCLA and became known for his publications on nonverbal communication. In fact, his communication model states that 55% of our communication is body language, which includes facial expression. That's more than half. 38% is the tone of your voice, and only 7% is what? The actual words coming out of your mouth. Only 7% of your communication is about what you're actually saying. I remember someone telling me a long time ago that they would enjoy hearing a tax document read to them in French, a language that was completely foreign to them. But that shows how important your tone of voice and pace is when communicating your message, whether to your partner, your boss, or your best friend. Let's start with the 55%, the body language. There are actual stances you can take that would release chemicals in your system and project different ways in which you're perceived. It's quite fascinating, really. Let's go back to that dreaded meeting you need to attend shortly. To boost your confidence, here's a stance you can do just before going into the meeting, maybe in a bathroom stall or behind a closed door. In this pose, it's all about making yourself as big as possible. So stretch yourself out, hold your arms wide, and keep your legs as wide apart as well. Or stand on the tips of your toes, that helps also. Take up space and open up as much as possible. Notice how I'm kind of like in a V shape. Now, hold this position for 2 minutes. This will increase testosterone levels in your system by up to 20%, and the effect will last anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. Simultaneously, your cortisol levels will fall sharply, which will allow you to better handle stressful situations. An alternate pose is to place your hands on your hips. This position can easily be done while engaging with others. I actually do this position a lot while at a client site working with a team. My timing, of course, is critical when I decide to do this, obviously, but often I use this when there's a person in the group who is maybe a naysayer or a doubter or a counter-exemplar. So while they're making their comment or asking their question, and I happen to be standing, I will nod my head in agreement while they are talking and continue to place my hands on my hips. Wait until they're done, affirm what they've said, and then say something like, "Great point," or "Excellent question." This continues to keep me in the role of authority, and I'm continuing to send myself testosterone and thereby being in a relationship with myself by boosting my own confidence, even though I might be in a stressful situation. Okay, what about that conversation you're too busy to have but really are avoiding? Okay, so start with the previous stance to increase your confidence levels by boosting your testosterone. Then, once with the person, if you need to drive the point home, cross your arms tightly against your chest and keep your shoulders back. The positioning of the shoulders here is quite key because if they're rolled forward, then you'd actually be communicating a sign of weakness or a defeat, so keep them rolled back. When I go into a speaking engagement where I'll be sitting down, I immediately spread myself out in my chair, even while the people are still coming into the room and getting settled. What I'm doing or communicating nonverbally here is that A, I'm the expert, and B, I really know my stuff. So it really gives an authoritative stance. Then, a little into it, as questions start arising, I'll actually make myself smaller. I wrap my arms around myself and cross my legs around my ankles. Here, I'm communicating that I'm smaller, less threatening, and therefore more approachable. It's appropriate for me to do this because the audience that I work with often bring up very personal issues and maybe feeling scared or vulnerable. So this is how I create safety in the room for that person and for all of the others witnessing how I'm engaging with that person. This might not be an appropriate stance for you. It just really depends on the situation. And there are times I might want to take it even a step further. I touch my neck and slouch down to give the impression that I'm even more approachable. And I do this especially when people are getting really emotional or having a tough time communicating. Now, if you need to close a deal, whether it's messaging or a contract deal, leaning forward while standing demonstrates a position of dominance, as you can clearly see here. But use this stance wisely because it can be easily interpreted as intimidating. I noticed that while sitting with clients, I often lean forward. And I did this because I was very engaged and passionate about what they were saying. One day, a client told me that she felt intimidated by my stance and asked if I would actually sit back in my chair. I have since been much more aware of my posture and especially how I'm showing up with people. Different people will interpret different things, of course, but on the whole, just be aware of how you're sitting, standing, positioning yourself at a table, in the meeting, at the restaurant, next to your partner. Have awareness about your nonverbal communication. Facial expressions also play a huge role in your body language. There are many tools out there on learning about facial expressions, but for starters, just noticing how you're showing up, how you are choosing to sit, stand, or greet others, that's huge. This will tell you a ton about how you're feeling in the moment and how you want to engage with others. And once you know that, you can shift it as appropriate. 38% is about how you're delivering the words coming out of your mouth. I remember a client, a mom, who was the author of a conscious parenting blog, telling me a story of her very young son who really couldn't speak at the time. Something had startled him, and she was attempting to figure out what it was. So she was saying things like, "Is it that you got scared and fell down?" Or she was asking him a plethora of different questions. After him saying yes to the fifth question, she realized that he was just saying yes to anything she asked. So she changed the questions to totally irrelevant things like, "You'd really rather that we shop at Costco, huh?" And when he started to say yes to those questions, she realized it was the way in which she was delivering the content rather than the content itself. Babies often stop crying when they're cooed at, and they begin crying when they're yelled at. But it's not just babies or young children. This goes for all of us. It's the energy and the intention that we load up behind the words we're about to launch at someone. When we denote dignity and respect in what's being delivered, rather than inquisition and distrust, we're more apt to stay engaged and receptive. Go back and watch section 4 of the psychology video called the Law of Requisite Variety. This may help to tie everything together. And finally, the 7%. Whatever you need to say it. I'll simply leave you with this thought. Remember Stephen Covey in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Well, habit 5 is, seek first to understand, then to be understood.